Do we need to stop asking game developers if their games are political? Are there any truly apolitical games, or are all games inherently political? Are we as gamers too afraid to tackle the big questions, or are we just sick of propaganda? My name's Henry Cooper, I'm here with Mr. Gareth Evans, and we're here yet again to talk about politics in gaming, specifically around Modern Warfare.
Well, we're tackling the bigger questions. If you want to call it politics, it's up to you.
We're not going to tell you.
We're here to define terms and to examine these questions. People are just too scared to do, I think. So, trigger warning for you people who maybe are a bit sensitive to people talking about politics and stuff like that. Just a little bit of disclaimer there, because
we're not trying to force any agendas here. We're just here to talk about it. You can then make up your own damn
If you
mind.
want to put the politics tag on it, that's fine. But we're not making a game, so we're not trying to force anything down your throat. And we're just going to try and explore it a little bit and see what we think and maybe what you think.
So why the hell on earth are we talking about this? So there was a recent article, I think, published today on gamesindustry.biz titled "Stop Asking, Is It Political? It Always Is." Opinion. So it's an op-ed on the site. And this refers pretty explicitly and specifically to a recent interview with Game Informer's Ben Hansen and a couple of the Modern Warfare devs. So we spoke with Jacob Minkoff, who is the game director, and the studio narrative director, Taylor Kurosaki. Posit the question to them, is your game political? And then they kind of explain their stance on it.
4.5 minutes later, he says no, but then goes on to explain that how political it is.
Our game's not political, but let me give you a list of reasons why it is. And this journalist kind of has some interesting stances on the point of that question and doesn't really see that it's necessary anymore. So a quick background on who he is. It's by Rob Fahey, currently a contributing editor for gamesindustry.biz, but according to his profile on the site, Rob Fahey is a former editor of gamesindustry.biz who spent several years living in Japan and probably still has a mint condition Dreamcast Samba de Amigo set. Then according to his Twitter bio, junior researcher at the Waseda Institute of Political Economy, the WINPEC, at Waseda University, Tokyo, co-founder of At Tokyo Review, accidental positivist. And he essentially spends all his time writing about UK and Japanese politics and then a bit about games and tech and all that sort of stuff, and he's got his own website. I'll just give you a quick background on the video itself. It's an interview with Ben Hansen from Game Informer with these Modern Warfare devs, and they essentially try to say that their game isn't political, and we'll get onto what that stance means and a bit in a sec. So Jacob Minkoff, the game director, said,
I don't think it's a political game. People read into that in different ways. That doesn't mean anything. The question, is this a political game, doesn't actually mean anything, because what does the word political mean to you?
Now, this may sound a bit odd because it's Call of Duty and it's about war, so obviously it is political, and I think this is the message that often gets muddied in these kinds of conversations, but the game isn't necessarily overtly, anyway, critical of anything.
It's very strange that he says, I don't think it's a political game, when then it obviously is, right? I think what he's trying to explain there is it's not political in the sense that you shouldn't be upset about it because we're not trying to push any sort of agenda. Because that's why people get upset with political games, because they see them as, they're trying to force their opinion on other people. He's trying to get away from that by saying it's not a political game, which is a false statement.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
It's all about power and all sorts of war.
War's on the box,
politics, right? Yeah. But he's trying to make the point here that doesn't mean anything. The question, is this a political game, doesn't actually mean anything. What does the word political mean to you? He's asking you to ask the questions. He's asking you to examine it, which is good.
It's actually a very good response. In that way.
He's trying to get you to think for yourself and just trying to examine what those words mean. Because if by is it a political game, if you think that means it's pushing some sort of agenda, you're wrong. So therefore, it's not a political game.
In those terms.
But if you think a political game, all that means is it includes political themes and explores them non-judgmentally, then it is a political game. So, he's saying that in a roundabout way, or he's just saying don't get upset with the game because it's not trying to tell you anything, or not trying to say what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, he goes on to explain what he thinks makes a political game, saying,
do we touch topics that bear a resemblance to the geopolitics of the world we live in today? Hell yeah, because that is the subject matter of Modern Warfare. Are we telling a story that has anything to do with the specific governments of any countries that we are portraying? No. Is Trump in the video game? No, he isn't. So if you wanted a situation where I would say that yes, it is a political story, I would have to be telling a story about specifically the exact administrations and governments and events in our world today. We are talking about thematic things. We would also have to have, I think, a perspective on it.
So that's pretty much him saying, we don't talk about real people. It's not a real analog or reflection of society, which is what Wolfenstein: The New Colossus was sort of almost accused of being by a lot of games media, because they made a game about Nazis in America, and a lot of journalists assumed that was a scathing commentary on the rise of fascism in the United States. But that's not necessarily what was happening in the game, because the devs didn't say that. They were like, no, we started writing this before any of your assertions happened, if that makes sense.
I mean, this was never an issue years ago, right?
No.
And I think that, is this just a symptom of how sensitive society's got towards politics and stuff? Like, it's like these days, especially with Twitter and with the political climate as it is in the world, I'm not going to point fingers or anything, but it's just the way it is. People just don't want to hear other people's opinions about politics. They don't want to discuss politics. They shoot people down. There's no conversation anymore. No. It's always either right or wrong, and it's my side versus your side. We're just so sensitive as a society now that it leaks down to these types of questions where journalists are sat there in front of devs asking them, is there politics in your game? Because all they want is a response from them so they can make a clickbait headline and say, oh, this is political.
That's certainly the argument that this Games Industry Biz author is pushing, is that if you're asking that question, you're just looking to drum up that outrage of people on Twitter with like armchair activists and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is what Rob Fahey is saying in this article, essentially. So let's have a look at a few of the quotes that are lifted from the article itself, the point that Rob Fahey is making. He's making the suggestion that journalists only ask the question for effect, and his quote goes, "It was the perfect gotcha question, because everyone in the room knew that the games being discussed had clear political meanings and intentions, but the interviewees weren't allowed to actually say that, so they ended up embarrassing themselves rather often. It merely adds to a dance of tedious expectations where the developer trots out some platitudes about how non-political everything is, purely to avoid getting screamed at in one ear by Twitter and in the other ear by their publisher's PR person." So, it sounds about right, getting screamed at on Twitter, that's for sure. But people on Twitter screaming because they're too sensitive to talk about politics. On the other side, PR companies do not want their developers talking about politics because they might cause a PR blunder and just end up getting a bad rep for it.
And journalists only ask this question because it will then make the developer jump around in trying to answer it without answering it, so that they don't get in trouble with Twitter. But then that journalist can then take what they've said and be like, well, they said it wasn't political, but they actually said this. Aren't I clever? I do absolutely agree that that's a lot of the conversation these days around games journalism and politics in gaming. They'll bring out the politics question even though it's not necessarily there. But in this case, I think Ben Hansen from Game Informer is doing the right thing by asking if this is political, because this specific game is at the center of the political discussion right now. So I think as a journalist, he should be asking them that question. It's not asking for an actual answer. It's more like, what do you think about this?
Yeah, because obviously the game's had headlines and people have been asking questions previously to this interview. So obviously going in, they would have understood that this game is under scrutiny because of it, which is why maybe we had a 4.5, maybe 5 minute answer from the devs, because they'd had a think about it, and they're thinking, where do we sit on the whole politics thing? We don't want to trigger people by saying, yes, there's politics in it, but at the same time, we want to get a message across that, is it an interesting type of thing, which is why I know the answer was a little bit muddy, I guess, you could say. But Rob Fahey goes on, there's no way they sat around and discussed putting players into the role of a child soldier without understanding that this is intrinsically a political statement. Talking about Call of Duty, obviously one of the missions in Call of Duty Modern Warfare this year will have you play as a child soldier, where you have to, take out a soldier, kill people as a soldier. I mean, that's been explored in the past. The one that springs to mind is Beyond Two Souls, where there's a child soldier in that in one of the missions. I mean, where was the outrage about that? Where were the articles about that question, whether that's right or wrong? I mean, again, that was a lot in the past, and the political climate was a lot different back then. Rob Fahey carries on. The problem is that they also know that the word political itself has become a rhetorical poison pill. You can do all the politics you like in your themes, your world building, your gameplay system, and your narrative, but as soon as you actually say the cursed words, yes, it's political, that becomes a focal point of everything about your game. I think he makes a good point there. I think that people get triggered, and it's a poison pill, which is why people don't want to admit that, yes, our game is political, because they're fearing the backlash from it.
Like, all of your writing can be political, you just can't say it in an interview or have it written anywhere, because then you'll get in trouble.
But that's just a misunderstanding of what people mean by it being political, right?
Yeah.
Like, political doesn't mean we're forcing an agenda. Political means we're just exploring political themes.
Yeah.
That's what it means to me, at least.
It poses the question and then we answer it.
We want to present the different perspectives. We don't want to say that one of them is correct, because what we want you to do is we want you to understand this is how these people feel. This is why they fight. This is the outcome of it. This is how these people feel. This is how these people feel. And what we want you to come away with at the end is an understanding of why all these different groups fight.
It's daft and unfortunate that the word that's so useful and well-defined has become so loaded and misunderstood. The demand that creators must keep politics out of video games is angrily hurled by a small but loud minority of consumers who either lack the wit to understand that games about war and conflict are inherently political, with the uncritical depiction of the status quo being a strong political stance in itself. Seems reasonable, right?
Yeah, he's essentially saying if you're too afraid of politics in your games, it's because you're not understanding that every single game is political, and choosing not to be political is still a political stance.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's like I'm telling you what to say, but don't tell me what to think.
Yeah.
It's the same. Isn't that like a bit hypocritical? Don't tell me what to think, but I'm telling you what to say. Therefore, I'm being political by telling you what to do, but you can't tell me what to do, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a bit complicated, right? Take Call of Duty. It's a war game. Most people know war is bad, but if they say war is bad in the game, people are going to get upset. But then if they don't say it, that's them, in effect, an argument could be made that they are endorsing war and encouraging it.
By not saying it's bad.
But it's all down to your interpretation.
There's all sorts of interpretations on Twitter. People get angry about anything you say, anything you don't say, anything you forget to say. If someone's angry about it on Twitter, I can guarantee.
Yeah, gone are the days when people just got mad about what you did say. Now it's mad about what you don't say.
But I mean, whether everything is political or not is the next question. And Cyberpunk creator Mike Pondsmith obviously said in an interview recently that everything is actually political, including Cyberpunk 2077. So he's not shying away from this. This is political, and his quote is, "Everything is political. Human beings are political. First we got food, then we got prostitution, then we got politics." And we might have gotten politics before prostitution, but I'm not sure. Basically, it's all political, but a big part of what Cyberpunk talks about is the disparities of power and how technology readdresses that. Are we wrong by saying keep politics out of our games? Because, all games are intrinsically political whether you like it or not, and like what's the better question to be asking? Don't tell us what to think,
Yeah. If a game is political and doesn't line with your personal political beliefs, that's fine. If you're heavily left-wing and you're playing a heavily right-wing game, that's fine. Just don't play it anymore. I don't think you ever have a right to tell an artist or a creator what they can and can't do.
Well, you think about it, right? Like TVs and movies, a lot of them are political, especially the best ones, like the Game of Thrones. That's the prime example. There's politics in that all the way through it.
Yeah.
But the beauty of Game of Thrones, it doesn't tell you who the hero is and who the villain is, right? There's a whole host of characters. They're not black and white. They're all kind of various shades of grey, which is something that the guy said in the interview, one of these Call of Duty devs.
In that big meaty gray area in between, the conflicts that arise, that's the meat of the conflicts that we want to examine.
And that's what's beautiful about Game of Thrones, is that everyone has their own hero, right?
Yeah.
That's why everyone got pissed off that, spoiler alert, Daenerys turned evil in the end.
Yeah, kind of.
Because,
out of nowhere.
People calling their kids like Khaleesi and stuff, and then she ends up being an evil tyrant. That's why people get upset. This is all political. It's all about power. It's all about who has the power and what's right and wrong in terms of how you treat the other people. I think that games are a different medium to TV shows, and obviously it's a different medium, right? But why should games not be allowed to explore those themes when TV shows and movies are? Like, games aren't just for kids, right? Games are for adults, and questioning what's right and wrong should not be only allowed in TV shows and movies just because some people get upset by the prospect that some games might ask difficult questions.
And there is a key difference between political themes and political propaganda, because I think it's fine to get annoyed at propaganda because it's going to possibly be fundamentally opposing what you believe. You can have a problem with that. I don't think you can tell them not to do that, but you can say, I disagree. But getting upset by the mere mention of any word of politics or the word political or anything like that, it's just daft, because everything is political to a certain extent, and then you blanket everything under the same banner. It's all agenda pushing. Well, sometimes it is there, yes, but it's not always.
And that's the distinction. That's what we should be pushing against. Games that have an agenda, that are trying to tell us what to think, those in my eyes are not good. Games which explore political themes but don't tell you what to think, they just lay out all the issues, allow you to make your own mind up, those should be promoted. What that does is promotes, your own rational thought and thinking about these issues deeply. I mean, a lot of people just play games and turn their brains off, like me, for example.
Fine.
I don't examine things too closely. I just play the games and have fun as a general rule. So I don't really get pissed off by any politics that don't align with mine in games.
Yeah. But then I also think on the flip side, if you are looking for some deeper metaphorical political meaning, that's fine. Find what you want from the game. Everything's up to your interpretation. And I think as gamers, if we didn't, I'm not trying to blame gamers or anything, but if we didn't overreact to the mere whiff of anything political, then devs wouldn't be afraid to openly talk about it and intelligently explain what they think about what they're doing and why they're doing it. Yeah. But at the same time, many journalists and people in the media try to put the politics in there when it's not to be found, like with Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, trying to say it's analogous for the state of American politics when it just wasn't the case, according to the devs.
I think the whole problem is society it's just too sensitive to other people's opinions that don't align with their own. People just get upset too quickly and they just can't accept that someone else has got a point of view that doesn't align with their own. And that's the problem here, right? Fundamentally, underneath everything, it's not that games have got politics in them, it's that people get triggered by that. That's what the problem is. So if everyone just relax a little bit and accept that other people's opinions are fine, it doesn't mean that you're going to get brainwashed or that anyone else is going to get brainwashed. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed your own opinion. Everyone's allowed their own opinions. Just relax a little bit, isn't it?
Obviously, gaming is a huge community, but that doesn't mean we're all the same. We all believe different things. We can all coexist.
I mean, this whole video has been laden with our opinions, right? Whether you understand them or not. And every single video, every single article you read, every single film that you watch or game that you play, there's always going to be some sort of underlying opinion about something or judgment about something that you just don't realize that is there. But there's no reason to be upset because other people's got opinions. That's just life. That's just human beings. That's just being alive.
Yesterday, I watched Tarantino's new movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Really good. Recommend it. Bit slow, but it's really good when it gets going. At the end, I won't spoil it, but there's something, a message I drew from it. It's like, oh, that's clearly this, in my opinion. But the people I was with were like, no, I didn't really get that. It was just a movie. I was like, oh, fair enough. But that's it, I suppose, for our chit-chat about politics this time.
How many people do you think we triggered? How many flamed comments do you think we got on this one?
We probably... I think we only covered this exact topic recently, but hey, it's an easy conversation, something we both care about, so we can keep doing it. But make sure you let us know what you think about all of these political questions and whether or not politics belong in games down in the comments. Are all games inherently political? Is it possible to even make them apolitical? Is Call of Duty something you're even interested in? Has the politics got you excited? I think the politics more than anything has got me more excited, which is kind of an odd one. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, go on over to patreon.com/prettygoodgaming if you want to support the content. I've been Henry, he's been Gaz. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.